Internal exposures are particularly dangerous, as some radioactive isotopes accumulate in specific parts of the body. This in turn can lead to cancers, organ failure, and a host of poorly understood diseases which can show up years after radiation exposure.
I am advising pregnant women and preschool-aged children to leave the area within a 5-mile radius of the 3-mile island facility until further notice.
Please remain indoors, doors shut, windows shut, fans not operating until you hear word that it is safe to go outside.
In March 1979, Unit 2 of the 3-mile island reactor in Pennsylvania suffered a loss of coolant accident and melted down. For several days, plant operators fought to keep the reactor core from exploding. To avoid such a catastrophe, operators released several hundred tons of radioactive gas into the air and eventually brought the power station back from the brink. No nuclear plants have been ordered and built in the United States since then. In April 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Ukraine exploded following an engineering test. Thousands of soldiers and workers sustained massive radiation doses in an attempt to quench the molten fuel and contain the disaster. The radiation plume spread around the world. 350,000 people in surrounding areas were evacuated and can never go back. Sharp increases in cancer rates and child mortality across the region were the most immediate consequence. Altogether, more than 5.5 million people still live in contaminated zones. The nuclear industry has tried hard to downplay the Chernobyl accident as a one-of-a-kind. But in August 2006, plant operators came within half an hour of another meltdown at the Forsmark reactor in Sweden. There have been other near misses in India, Germany, and the United States. Despite this extraordinary history, some people still suggest that nuclear power has a role to play in the urgent transition away from fossil fuels. Australia holds around 30% of world uranium supplies. We're the world's second largest uranium exporter. In 2005, we sent 9,500 tons overseas. Spurred on by industry speculation and a supply shortfall, the world uranium price has begun to rise. Australian politicians are being encouraged by the mining industry to cash in on expanded uranium exports, starting with the Honeymoon mine in South Australia. A major exploration boom is underway, identifying prospective uranium mines right across the country. An aggressive push has begun to build enrichment plants and up to 25 nuclear power stations in Australia.
And we're going to use new technologies that effectively and safely recycle spent nuclear fuel. In other words, we're coming together to say, how can we do a better job of reprocessing and recycling fuel?
And under the United States Global Nuclear Energy Partnership, Australia is again being promoted as an ideal location for dumping the world's high-level nuclear waste. It is argued that this is the price we must pay to maintain our current levels of energy demand in an age of climate change. Unfortunately for the nuclear industry, there is one last catch. Every stage of the nuclear fuel chain is heavily dependent on cheap fossil fuels. With every passing year, high-grade uranium deposits are being depleted. As more reactors are built and ore grades decline, more and more energy has to go into producing nuclear fuel to get the same energy out. In a few decades' time, nearly 2 million tons of rock will have to be crushed, chemically treated, and left in enormous tailings dams to power one reactor for 1 year. Adding this to the enormous carbon emissions of enrichment plants and other stages of the nuclear fuel chain, we find that in time, nuclear plants will generate as much greenhouse pollution as gas-fired power stations. There is no way that nuclear power can claim to be a solution to climate change. Many are now looking elsewhere for answers to the climate crisis, and fortunately, those answers are all around us. A range of renewable energy technologies are taking off. Intermittent sources, including solar and wind, are being combined with baseload sources, including geothermal, biomass, microhydro, and combined heat and power systems. In countries where institutional and market barriers to these new technologies have broken down, uptake of renewable energy has been spectacular. Many nations and states are adopting ambitious renewable energy targets. China has established a 15% target by 2020, and California has adopted 20% by 2017. Other countries are aiming much higher. Australia still has no renewable energy target. Green energy sources are combining with new ways of thinking about energy. Using energy more efficiently means we end up using less, and it's much cheaper to save electricity than to produce it. We are being offered a false choice between climate change and a radioactive future. But there are no technological barriers to a world powered by clean energy. The barriers are entirely political